So then a bigger, wider question I have for you is that everything was going well for Bitcoin. The price was good. Tesla had bought some. Michael Saylor had bought most of it. Lots of positive projects, investments, like everything was going well. And yes, the macro environment hasn't been great, but like we expect things like that. But the decisions of, or the behavior of 4 or 5 institutions / companies / funds have really like fucked it up for everyone, right?
Yeah.
When you look at this and you consider the future of Bitcoin, like how do we stop this happening again? Like, can we stop it happening again? Will people learn from this?
I hope so. I mean, look at all the pain we went through in, at the end of 2017, 2018, it's all, jumbled in my head, right? You had all these like, ICO projects that were coming out that were complete scams, and they were, pumping up the price of everything because everybody was getting excited about it. And then it all came crashing down, right? And by the way, people yell at the maxis. I mean, I don't consider myself a maxi. I consider myself a Bitcoin only as digital currency. I like all technologies, but as far as Bitcoin goes, I'm like, this is going to be the digital currency in my opinion, right? Everything else is something different. But I appreciate these people that are the loud maxis because they remembered what happened in the ICO scams, and they're out there trying to protect this ecosystem. So yeah, I absolutely appreciate them. They get annoying, but I love them. You know what I mean? Like they're doing what they think is right, and they are protecting the newbies, right? So what's happened in this particular cycle is a ton of leverage was created to pump the price. I mean, 69,000 wasn't the right price for Bitcoin. That was a pumped, over-levered price. And I think in this last cycle, I was pretty vocal on it, on a lot of the leverage. Caitlin Long, there was a few other people that, that came from banking, like, banking Wall Street, like Caitlin and I did, that were like saying, this is a problem. And every chance we could, we would talk about, okay, let's find out how they're making yield. Let's find out how Celsius is making yield. And they never would say. And we told people to avoid those platforms, and we avoided them. Anybody that was trying to produce, a massive amount of leverage, we were avoiding them. And I hope that people will speak up in the next cycle. Bitcoin goes in 4-year cycles based on halving. And I'm sure 2 years from now, when everything is fine again and prices go up again, people are going to get excited, they're going to get greedy, and they're going to pump things up on leverage. And I hope people remember this point in time and say, okay, stop, cut it out. Let's, and by the way, leverage isn't bad. Over leverage is bad.
Yeah. And you can't really stop leverage, right?
No, you can't.
Do you think...
I mean, how do you buy a car without leverage? How do you buy a house without leverage?
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think there can be a market for borrowing and lending with Bitcoin?
Yes.
It can work.
Yeah. Yeah. There just has to be a two-sided market, and it's not going to be these ridiculous yields that we're seeing, right? I think there's a market out there where somebody has Bitcoin that they collateralize because they need to buy something, right? I mean, that's really how I see it, right? If I'm holding my Bitcoin and I don't want to have to sell it and pay taxes when I sell it, I can collateralize it to borrow some dollars to buy a car, buy a house, something like that. And that's fine. There's a reasonable interest rate that you would pay on that. And then there's a reasonable rate that somebody else would borrow against it, right? I mean, it happens all the time. And I think as the ecosystem grows, there's going to be a reasonable, lending market there, but it has to be two sides. It can't just be some pop-up, lending platform or marketplace that's one-sided and have to go find, go find people to run a hedge fund with your money. Like, that's not the proper way of running, of offering leverage.
Do you think that perhaps the market isn't mature enough for it at the moment, and that's why it happened?
It's not mature enough for it. I mean, this is how banks work.
Yeah.
Right? When you put money in a bank, the money's just not sitting there. The money is used to lend people money to buy houses and cars. It's really simple. you know, and there's due diligence done on the people, and sometimes they get over leveraged and blow up, and things go wrong. But generally banks work out, you know, until they get into exotic instruments like they did in, you know, 05 through 07.
Okay, back to your crystal ball, which I should have listened to. Danny and I should have listened to when you sat there and told us. I'm going to ask you what your outlook is for the year. Like, you don't have to give me a definite answer, but like, what are the range of things that you're thinking about, looking at on the macro environment? Because we are so correlated to the macro environment.
Yeah, I think from a macro perspective, you know, and I'm going to talk specifically to the U.S. Because a lot of other markets follow it. But in the U.S., the Fed is going to raise rates at least 100 basis points more. Inflation is still a factor, despite a lot of people saying that we're
100 basis points is 1%.
Yeah, another 1%.
Yeah, okay.
Could be 150. Could be 200 basis points.
What's the current rate?
What is it? 475.
Okay.
Yeah. So so it's that's going to make a tough environment, because companies that have corporate debt are having to borrow now at a higher price, which means their debt service is higher. Especially high yield bond issuing companies, so junk bonds. And those companies can barely make their debt service as it is, but if rates go higher, it's going to be a lot tougher. And then you're going to have a lot of situations like Toys R Us and Sears and, you know, some of these other ones that we remember in the last 10 years. But it's going to be very difficult for these companies to buy commodities, produce something, sell goods, and pay high rates to just keep their companies operational. And a lot of these companies should have failed in the last 10 years anyway, but low rates kept them alive, which is why we've been producing a lot of junk into the market and people have overconsumed. So I think that starts going away. Some of those companies start going away. It causes equity markets to go down. So potentially double-digit default rates in corporate bonds over the next 18 months.
When you say double-digit default rates, what do you mean by double-digit default rates?
12% of all junk bonds default.
So what does that actually mean? Like 12% companies or 12% of the economy?
Well, 12% of all the companies that issue junk bonds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do people buy something called a junk bond if it's junk?
Well, it's not really junk. Okay. It's I came from the fixed income, bond world, and we called it high yield because it yields a little higher.
But it's more high risk.
It's higher risk.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the impact of that?
Well, oddly enough, the high yield bond market is highly correlated to the S&P.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't realize that, but because a lot of those companies are either in the S&P or have relationships with companies in the S&P. So if you get to, say, we'll be conservative, say 8 to 12% default rates in high yield bond issuing companies, that means the S&P could drop. That means liquidity comes out of the system, and liquidity is already coming out of the system with rates going up. The S&P could drop another 20%. It's already down 20% over the last year. Mm-hmm. So we're probably talking another 20%. And by the way, the Fed doesn't care. The Fed doesn't care if the S&P goes down 20%. They don't care if corporate defaults are high. They care about two things: inflation and unemployment.
Right. But in trying to reduce inflation, they're going to raise unemployment, or do the jobs just migrate to other jobs?
Well, that's kind of what's happening right now. Is we have a lot of open jobs, but it's mostly in the service sector and in the manufacturing sector, or in the farming sector. Right? People don't want to work those jobs. People want to work at Twitter and drink mimosas in the morning, work for a couple of hours on a beanbag, and go to early lunch with their friends and go for the rest of the day. I mean, I don't know if you saw those videos.
I did see those videos.
They're amazing.
Like, to the point where I almost thought, is this real?
Yeah.
Like, when they talk through their day, have you seen these videos?
No.
It's like, I got to work and I got myself a green tea mocha thingy with a vegan almond brownie. And then I went to my pod and had a meeting. And then I went for lunch at this place. And then I went for dinner and had mimosas. Then we went to this place and went dancing. It's like the most, it looks, to me, it looked like it was satire.
But it's not.
It's not satire.
And these
videos-
And who produced this?
Somebody is telling their day on TikTok or some bullshit.
Okay.
I actually think that it wasn't. I actually think that the companies were producing this because they were trying to hire people, and they're like, "Look how great it is working here. Look how great it is to work at LinkedIn."
You do no work, you eat and drink all day, and then you get drunk in the evening.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like our job.
Hey, I'm 5 days, 5 days no beer.
But that is, I mean, it sounds crazy, but like people couldn't find enough. I mean, there weren't enough people to hire, and they needed bodies, and they couldn't overwork people because people would just leave. So they're like, all right, fine, we'll give you, you can work 4 hours a day and do whatever the hell you want, and we just need bodies to do a couple of things. But that's all gone now. I mean, companies
can't find enough people to fire.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But I know the Fed are mandated to keep unemployment low, but aren't they doing everything at the moment to do the opposite?
Well, their mandate is to have stable employment at a low rate, but right now unemployment's too low. Okay, so 3.5% is too low. 5% is I would say that's a fully employed system, because I mean just think about society. Okay, 5% of the population are unemployable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just basic behavioral science. So when you have 3.5% unemployment, that means 1.5% of the workforce is just completely unemployable.
You're fucking idiots.
Yeah, and then you can't hire anybody because nobody wants to leave their, the jobs that they have.
So you need to crush demand to get that 1.5% out of work.
That's exactly right.
Right. So when you hear about demand destruction, you think that sounds like fucking idiotic. Why would you want demand destruction? But actually, there's a logic to it.
Well, there is, and here's the logic. Okay, we had a good 10 years after the financial crisis where we had easy monetary policy, but inflation was pretty muted. The reason why was wage growth. So wage inflation, wage growth is what drives inflation. And everybody said, well, inflation's coming. Like, no, not until wages grow. But then we started having less and less employees for the jobs that we needed because inflation was low and because we had easy monetary policy. And then all of a sudden, inflation crashes because people are getting 10% more a year because they can't find people. They can't find people to work.
Right. So are you saying that inflation comes from wage growth?
Yeah. It's one of the things it comes from, but yeah.
Huh. Okay. So basically you're saying the good times are over.
Yes.
Now we're doing a bit of a reset, a necessary reset. Mm-hmm. And you think those interest rates will stay high for how long?
Well, I think they go up and stay up for at least the next year.
Okay. So that's a problem for the government.
Yes.
Because they're having to pay high interest on their bonds and their debt.
That's right.
And so what can the government do about that? Because they've got a lot of fucking debt. It's like in the UK, we've got a lot of debt.
Well, here's the breaking point. You nailed it.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely nailed. This is where the breaking point comes. Inflation's not going away. Unemployment's not going away. The U.S. just passed a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill. That means stimulus. That means they're driving inflation while the Fed's trying to control it. A lot of that stimulus is also creating jobs.
I saw that. You're going to build bridges.
That's right.
Biden's going to build bridges. But is that in preparation for the 12% destruction?
No.
Oh, it's not.
No, this is just, I don't even know what this is. This is just pork barrel spending.
And when does this start?
So, well, it starts this year, right? So you've got all this money that needs to be processed in the system, free money, more jobs, higher inflation, while the Fed is trying to lower jobs or increase the jobless rate and lower inflation. So the two are at odds right now. The nice thing about having Republicans control the House again, right? And I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I care less about either one of them. But I like I like stalemate in government because that means no more spending, no more bad policy making. I mean, in the U.S. it's good when no one's in control. And there's chaos. I actually like the fact that right now they can't decide on a House Speaker. That means they can't get anything done. That means they can't do anything to mess anything else up.